At number 3 on the Iconic 100 is the T206 Honus Wagner. And here to talk with us about it today is the one and only David Ratliff, signed and slabbed on Instagram. David, number 3. I was really interested to see where this one would come in. What do you think about this?
Me too. I'll be honest, I'm a little bit surprised. When you think a lot about just well-known cards, I mean, the Honus Wagner has been the baseball card, I mean, for as long as any of us can remember. Like, that's not a new phenomenon. That goes back into the 80s, really, when cards were really starting to merge again. But even the collectors before that, they obviously knew what it was. It's been in every publication you can think of. It's incredibly expensive, right? I think what 3/4 of one just sold not long ago for maybe like $1 million. I mean, even part of a card, people know what it is. So I'm a little bit surprised. I'll be interested to see what collectors think. Higher than that, it was absolutely number 1 on my list. The easiest card to recognize within and even without the hobby. People when they see it, they know it's got a much bigger lore to it, even outside of collecting. So a little surprised, but hey, top 5 is pretty good on any list like this.
No, I really struggled at the top with the top 3. And now that we're here at number 3, I think it's pretty obvious what the top 2 cards will be. I'll actually let you know, though, I agree with you. I had this as the number 1 most iconic card. And it's because, even going back to when we were kids, even going back to, like you said, the early 80s, people knew that this was the card, right? It's been the card. It's been kind of the Mona Lisa of cards forever.
Yeah.
And so, is it as recognizable as, these other 2 cards that we still have to come? It depends on how people think about it, but it was easily number 3rd on most people's lists. They had those other cards as the top 2, but I'm with you. When I think about iconic, the Honus Wagner T206 really comes to my mind. This card has been one that's been talked about in many different places and in different ways, but why don't you give us a couple minutes on why it has the status that it has in the hobby today? Because Honus Wagner, although he's a great player, clearly not the best baseball player of all time. So why is it the number 3 most iconic card, across the whole hobby?
Yeah, so the T206 set is really it's one of the top 5 most recognized types of cards. Regardless of whose picture is actually on the card, people are able to recognize what they are. And, collectors figured out at some point that the Wagners were just not as populous in that set. And so from just a rarity perspective early on, and baseball card collecting was really about set collecting in its earlier days. In order to finish your set, you had to run this down, and so the hobby figured out pretty early on that they weren't out there. And there are a lot of conflicting stories about what had really happened, related to that he didn't really want his picture in the cigarettes for the kids to be getting, or or maybe there were some licensing images at the time with some of those players. So I don't really think we know that 100%. But I mean, this card is one of the most researched, most talked about, and Adam, look, it's got the benefit of kind of having been the one, for the better or the entirety of a century, right? And so it now, with more social media and a little bit better, the development of the internet and the ability for people to go find these things and have information at their fingertips, and just the ability to kind of promote certain cards, talk about them more, Listen, I don't think this card's going anywhere anytime soon.
Oh,
Every time one sells, it is a big number, and all the publications pick it up, not just hobby, right? Financial publications pick it up. They talk about it on TV. They show pictures of them before they're even auctioned off. I think anyone who is a really significant vintage baseball collector, has the dream of owning one of these things one day. And so, because of that, I just think it's going to continue to kind of carry that prestige. It's going to take a lot to move it down the list. And honestly, over time, it wouldn't shock me that it could move back up.
I agree.
So this is a very familiar card. The lines to look at them when they're on display at the National,
Yep.
right? The chance to be able to just be able to see it, or even like I'm sure you've seen plenty of social media people, just the chance to hold it, right? That there's something about it, and just its place in hobby history over this long of a time frame. I mean, super, super iconic. Big winner card. Like it's a collection by itself in a lot of ways, right?
There's not enough words to use on this one. I think it's
So,
worth taking a little bit more time on this one. So I'm glad that you're willing to. The way that I think about this card, you've got Wayne Gretzky, who owns the most, who owned at one point
yeah,
the copy that is considered, the best. And then we learn
best.
later that copy is trimmed. People go to jail, right? Like, you've got this long story about this one single copy. It is the Mona Lisa of cards. There's just no question to me. These other two cards that are going to come on this list, they're amazing. We both have probably owned copies of those cards. But this is not a card. Like, I would have loved to own that one where 2/3 of the copy was in existence, because it's a card that has books written about it. ESPN it wasn't 30 for 30, but something like 30 for 30 about it. It has a history that is richer and deeper than any other card ever made, and it's not close. And so, to
Right.
me, that is what we're getting at when we talk about iconic. It's been iconic for 40 years, and it will be iconic forever. And as long as the most expensive card sales of all time are this card, you sort of
Right.
feel at peace with the world. I mean, it is, David, it's the card, and we agree. And I don't think it's bad that it ended up at 3. I think it's fine, because the other two
Yeah.
cards
And
are
again,
great,
we're ranking iconic, not necessarily
right?
most expensive or even most desirable. I mean, I think you would probably agree with me that the Honus Wagner in any grade is, I mean, is it still the most sought after baseball card, but it may be still the most sought after sports card. There are people that want to own this card that may not even own 5 cards total. And I don't think that's any different than when Gretzky had owned it before.
That's right.
So, it is highly sought after, even like I said, just to see it. If a Wagner took a tour around the US,
That's right.
I mean, people would pay to go to the museum to look at these things. They
Yep.
really would, because it's a once in a lifetime opportunity in a way, just to kind of see it. Like you said, you go to France, you go see the Mona Lisa. If the Wagner came to your town, you would absolutely do what you could to go down there just to get a glimpse of it, much less like have the ability to own one. So, I agree with you. It's a big, big card.
The
And,
last
and yeah, go ahead.
the last national I went to was in 2019. I took a picture with one card.
Yep.
You can guess which one it was. I
Yeah.
mean, it's the card. David, what else? What else is there to say? We could talk about this card forever. What are your last thoughts on the card?
This is there aren't enough superlatives for this card. It's well known. It's valuable, almost beyond measure. It's not necessarily super rare, but it is rare enough. And again, when you have over 100 years of hobby history behind you, cards like this particular card gets just elevated to a place that's really tough to move it from. And so, like you had mentioned, every time I'm at the National, because that's the only place I ever feel like I can
Right.
go to have a chance to see one. And I've been in Nationals where there wasn't one to see.
Wow.
So it gets on a plane that really few other cards are able to get to. And and listen, Adam, the great thing about it too, though, I think from a collecting standpoint, it really does help capture your imagination of what could be, right? And that card is still one that in this era of where we've seen a lot of really big increases in values of cards, this is the one that led the way, right? I mean, it was always at the top, and it just kind of kept going. And we all go back and look at what these things had sold for, and your parents were used to joke with you about, like, your house wasn't even enough to buy one. And I mean, that's even more especially true now. But
Sure.
that, I think that card just helps really capture the imagination of what is out there, and just the enjoyment that can be found around the hobby, kind of chasing these things down still, even of guys that you didn't even see play. And so, to me, that's it. It's that card. And if you've never seen one and you're at the National, or wherever, like, you get a chance to see it, like
So
it,
cool.
you know.
Great perspective, David. Something you said earlier that I think is worth sort of reminding everyone about is these things change over time. And
Yeah,
I,
they do.
like you, I would not be shocked at all if, we do this list again in 2023 or 2024. I wouldn't be shocked at all to see this card jump back up, but I would be
Right.
shocked to see any other card pass it, because
Yep.
when we were tabulating the votes and doing all the calculations, I will tell you the first three were close. Everything after
Drop.
there were the first three, and then there was a real drop after that. And
Yep,
so
I believe it.
this is it, and we'll see if in the future it's higher. But again, I really want to thank you for your perspective. I think it's wonderful, and really am grateful that you've been willing to be with us today. Tomorrow, we will be back with the number 2 card on the Iconic 100. And until then, happy collecting.